Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Daily Medicine transmission for October 21st, 2021. We are post full moon, so we are now officially in the second half of the lunar cycle. We are officially in the waning gibbous phase of our moon, and the moon is in Taurus, right? Which it loves to be in. It's exalted in Taurus. It's familiar territory. And that part of ourselves really loves to nestle into the medium that surrounds us, the medium of our growth. So whatever, came to our awareness, whatever came to full reflection and illumination as of yesterday's full moon is now ready to really be embedded in the medium of that growth. And we have to be consciously participating in it, hence the title of today's transmission. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you to all of my subscribers, everybody commenting, liking, sharing this content, regardless of what platform you find yourself on. When you find this content, thank you so much for being here. I truly do appreciate each and every one of you. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Thanks for being here. And as always, whenever you interact with this content, by subscribing, by liking, commenting, and sharing, it does lead the algorithm to recommend this video to more people. That actually does happen, strangely enough. The system does in some ways work, and so I really appreciate you participating in any way that you can. And of course, subscriptions are the best. Liking this video really has an impact, and I love the comments. I love the commentary. I love the conversation. I want to bring more of that into this realm. So we're going to look at just a couple random, maybe not so random things today out there in the physical, geophysical world, just to kind of bring our awareness to what is actually happening on the planet in a geological, in a very chemical, physical way, just to show what's happening. And then we're going to get right into the reading, because we are post full moon, and there's certainly a level of satisfaction that I feel like is coming, or has been brought about by this full moon. Whatever it is that's coming to you, that you've seen with full awareness, and you're ready to release or let go, and also what you want to embrace as well. The full moon is not strictly, as far as I can tell, it's not strictly about just releasing things. It's also about acknowledging what has grown over time. And so now we're reaching a phase with, of course, this last half of the lunar cycle, as the moon goes into its waning phase, and that illumination and the reflection of the sun's light starts to literally wane. And so we kind of start going back into the cave a little bit until the very end, when we have our new moon on November 4th, our new moon in Scorpio. It's going to be in opposition to Uranus. So that's going to really jar some things loose and really, really test our ability to make the most of situations and put together things that maybe we had not figured out or even considered putting together before. There's something about the Scorpio realm that does give us an urge and a very strong drive to merge with other in order to get a deeper, more meaningful experience. And part of that sometimes is being kind of like an inventor in a lab, right? You have to be willing to try some things. And in opposition to Uranus in Taurus, having the baggage of social ambition, the accumulation of actual resources, it comes with a price, and it comes with a literal baggage, and we have to be very aware of that as well. And when we're talking about Scorpio, and I know that I'm getting ahead of myself, but this has come up really strongly, and I want to share it now before it flies out of my mind, is that, and this came up in a reading that I did yesterday, actually, in reference to this, looking ahead. So also the sale for how it ends, I'm gonna extend that. And just to clarify, that's 90-minute reading for $99. And so I'm gonna extend it till the next new moon, just because it's so important. And I really want people to take advantage of it if they are in a position to do so, because they're turning out to be very powerful and very insightful readings. So But when we talk about Scorpio, because we're getting real close to Scorpio season, right? The sun is at 28 to 29 degrees Libra today. So we're kind of reaching this peak point in our social expression of self, right? Our own creative expression within ourselves in this conscious participation, right? A very deep and meaningful participation in the social order and in relationship, which is really important when we get into Scorpio season, when you start to sink into the depth, right? You go into the abyss in order to see and feel what is really at the root of our relationships, power dynamics, what we create together. And so it's very powerful regardless of what it is we are creating together. And that's what we see in the realm of Scorpio. But when we come to this new moon, and this is why it's important now to talk about this, because this last half of the lunar cycle is giving us the opportunity to see from the full moon from yesterday what it is that's working, what it is that's time to let go of and release it over the course of this next 2 weeks, and to also embrace and cultivate what has been working along this process of growth. And there's a lot of change that's happening right now, like a lot of change within ourselves, right? Things taking on new meaning, future-oriented growth, and it's real easy. It's very easy and tempting to go for the path of least resistance along this way, right? To take the handout psychically of what's being provided without and not actually taking the time and doing and securing our own energetic and psychic intuitive sustenance by our own natural means. It's very tempting, right? And this is the benefit and the curse in some ways of a social value paradigm or a belief system, that you don't have to actually do the work or excavate it yourself, which we're going to find here that Mercury is about to move. It's starting to move now in forward momentum. And that whole concept of excavation and the ability to do both, excavate and then come up for air, is really going to be strongly on our minds right now, right? We're going into these darker realms when we get into the Scorpio season. And we have to be able to come up for air. We have to understand the value of coming up for air, but we also can't give up on the journey and the exploration and the discovery that goes along with that. But when we accumulate resources, when we have social ambition, which is a normal part of being a human being in an objective material world, right? I've been really looking at a lot of pop culture and music through a different lens lately. So just, Madonna's Material Girl really comes to mind at this point in terms of where her focus was, where many of our focus tends to be, and what that comes with, right? It comes as a weight. And so when you're in Scorpio time, which is opposite of Taurus, by the way, and you have to you don't have to, but you find yourself drawn and very driven to merge into a collective cooperative situation, a relationship of some sort. You find that if you have too much weight, if you have too much baggage from your own ego and from your own accumulation and ambition, it will weigh you down, and you will not be able to come back up for air as you start sinking into the depths of what it means to be in a cooperative, communal, shared experience or relationship. So when we get to that point of the new moon, it's going to be the weight of our social ambition, our own ego consciousness, that we're going to have to contend with, and we will be given an opportunity to set some intention here within ourselves to be able to not sink from that, but to actually use those resources in a way that is, being willing to put some things together that maybe we hadn't put together before, right? Be willing to consider completely new concepts or ideas in areas that had previously not even been considered, right? So that'll be when we come to the new moon. So as we go through the rest of this cycle, now that we've had this full moon and we had a lot, and it's an Aries full moon. Of course, people are going to be angry and they're going to be explosive and they're going to be expressive. And that's it's plastered all over social media yesterday in terms of this the full moon. But really, our ability to be able to handle that level of expression, be able to handle that level of disappointment and the ability to be responsible and mature about an expression of anger or disappointment is really, really important. So, because we're going to have to, again, we don't want to take stuff with us that is going to weigh us down even more than just the sinking into the abyss of our own subconscious, right? And the power dynamics of relationships. If we sink into it and we have that stone around our neck, it's going to be really hard to come back out of it. So at least with the new moon in November, there is an option and an opportunity to utilize those resources as a means to create something new or invent something new or make different connections that we never made before. But we have to also acknowledge that the more that we want to, it's like we want to cultivate this beautiful garden in our own ego consciousness, all of these beautiful ideas, all of this growth of ourselves, right? We're now embedded in the medium of our growth, the moon in Taurus. It's tempting to just keep growing it and growing it, and we have to realize that we're not growing it necessarily for ourselves. We're growing it for the sake of growing it. We're growing it because this is the sacred imperative of life, is to do so. And we can support it. We can nurture it. We can cultivate it. We can water the garden, right? All of those things. And there's something for us to have from that, right? A beautiful garden, actual sustenance. But there is a counterbalance to all of the ambition of accumulation of resources. And we will be dealing with that coming down the line. And so right now is our time to go within and to be able to recognize within ourselves and also be able to express and to emote and to feel into other social situations, relationships that we're in, the larger social order that we're part of, what it means to be part of a social order or a relationship, and that our behavior, our actions, our energy is inseparable from everything else. And that's ultimately the lesson of the 12th house when you finally come back around. And it's a very difficult lesson and is kind of the undoing of most people, because if you don't actively address these things along the way, you still have to deal with the karma of it by the time you get to the end. And that's often why the 12th house is the house of endings and of our undoing, because many times humanity as a whole, we really struggle with what this means. So we're in an interesting time frame right now that's going to allow us to take what we have seen with this full moon in terms of the way we feel about ourselves, our responsibility to our own actions, freedom, independence, a propensity towards that, and apply that to the larger social context, because we do want to, and we are finding our fulfillment right now through this conscious participation, a very deep and committed conscious participation. And you're going to need it, because when you go into Scorpio, that first degree is the tour bus to hell, right? We're all on it together. And at that point, there's no getting off. So you better be consciously and committed to this participation in this social life. Okay. So one thing I just want to show you, this is going to be just very quick, okay? Just to give you a sense. Look at this, Mount Asu volcano eruption update. This was yesterday. Remember we talked about this yesterday in terms of the, let me turn on, I got to turn on all of my, I got to turn on all of the microphones and blah, blah, blah. So remember we talked about all of those earthquakes that were happening around Japan. So
on October 20th, 2021, a large volcanic explosion occurred at the Mount Aso volcano in Japan. Over the span of 8 minutes, at 11:43 a.m. local time, an explosive eruption ejected particles of ash to a height of 3,500 meters or 11,482 feet. It did not take long for the eruption column to soon after collapse back to the ground, generating a series of destructive pyroclastic flows. These superheated currents destroyed all vegetation in their path, traveling at least 1.5 kilometers or 4,900 feet before they stopped. For some context,
Okay, I'm gonna exit out of this. I just wanted to show you too, like, oh my God, you see the billowing of that, did you see the billowing? That was insane. And that happened very, very quickly. So remember, we saw all of those earthquakes. Now, I'm not just showing you that just because, although you can just find a generalized interest in those things if you want, but there is a connection between the solar forcing of and solar weather. There's a connection between that. The connection between volcanic eruptions that seem to be increasing. There were more earthquakes, seismic activity around Greece and Crete, again, large. So that area, that tiny little area there in the Mediterranean, right around Crete, south of like the mainland Greece, right, is very active. And I wonder what is going on down there. So, it's just bringing your awareness to what is actually happening. So the solar weather is pretty mellow. We are entering that coronal hole stream. And so that means the solar wind speed goes up, but the magnetic field is really buffering it pretty well. And so we're not really getting a ton of geomagnetic disturbances, the auroras and possible impact of, radio frequencies and things like that. And that also means that we may not be as affected either. Although, again, with the full moon, huge full moon, because for me, it's coming up at night, because it's getting dark at like 6:30 now. It's rising when it's dark, and it's not setting until right before dawn. And so it's like it's just up all night. So if you're also feeling like pretty active dream state, if you're having a hard time sleeping, waking up a lot, I just feel like the moon is really, bringing our subconscious up to the surface, which makes sleeping a little bit more difficult, or certainly having very, very vivid dreams. But it's important to be tracking all of these things in terms of like volcanoes, seismic activity, and the moon. And I will say that earthquakes, there is a strong correlation that is measured between eclipses and seismic activity and earthquakes. So, and we've talked about that, right? We talked about how the path of totality for the next solar eclipse is over Antarctica, and it's at that 13 degrees of Sagittarius we just talked about, right? The retribution, the widow's past brought to light. It's going to be an interesting and very challenging winter, as if it hasn't been already. My gosh. But it's just getting more so. It's getting more so. So we do need to be consciously participating in what new is coming forward. And there surely is new coming forward. That's for sure. It really has a lot to do with how we are going to embrace it, or how we are going to, be able to hold it, how we hold ourselves in the process, how we participate in it. There's a lot of things coming together. So I'm gonna check in with the stream real quick. Happy Thursday to Meow Meg. Good morning, Olivia. Thank you guys so much for being here. I truly appreciate your participation. So let's get into the reading here, and I'm gonna bring it up because we're not done. It's gonna feel like we're done, but we're not, and we'll explore this a little bit, and then we'll get into the astrology for today. So our first causal factor coming into the moment here is something that does certainly designate an ending and a beginning, right? The 10 of Cups, being satiated emotionally. So, of course, with a full moon like that, especially in Aries, because this card is represented by Mars in Pisces. Look how forceful this water is. Like, there's like sheets of water. It's almost like spray, just shooting out. And it is in the shape of the Kabbalah, the tree of life, that the current Kabbalah is bringing it is drawing the energy down. If you understand or study the Kabbalah at all, or Jewish mysticism, right? The idea that the tree of life or the Kabbalah, the energy is meant to end at the very bottom. It's bringing the spirit down into form, which, that's a conversation that I think is worth having in terms of if it's inverted or not, in a different time. But what we see here is a very forceful, momentum, which is very Mars-like, of course, pouring, not even pouring, it's shooting out, it's spraying out and filling all of these cups. The top one is filling all of them except for the bottom two. And the bottom two are being filled indirectly by the top one, because the top one is filling the middle. And then if you understand all of the different positions and their Hebrew name, you could identify them as such and then start to really make some connections to the tarot, because they're all connected to each other. But this is a very forceful ending and beginning of a very emotional and feeling-based cycle, right? The water is our feelings, it's our energy moving, it is the chi in our body, and all of the fluids, right? Because the chi is carried by the blood, right? So it's very fluid-based, I would say, even though it's impalpable. This is very forceful. It's a very forceful connection here. And so and we just had this Aries full moon, a very large Aries full moon. It's like it's massive. And so we can feel satiated almost to the point like where we're forcefully spilling out. And of course, this goes along with, the standard kind of reading of the full moon of people being really angry and picking fights and wanting to engage in arguments and needing some sort of like whipping post in order to express themselves and not engaging in any of these battles. I had absolutely and like I said yesterday, my full moon position, it's in my third house, communication, active communication in your immediate environment, your interactions with the people around you, in your immediate environment, your thoughts, your ideas, empirical reasoning, right? The flow of information, all of those things. I had no problems, and I don't really have any strong Aries in my natal chart really at all. And so maybe that's why, but I didn't have any of those issues. And perhaps if I had been way more socially based, it would certainly come out more, but I just was not feeling that at all. I was just kind of feeling I was definitely feeling the forcefulness of all of this energy moving through me and out, but it wasn't angry at all, or trying to start fights or anything like that. That's just me, right? Everybody's experience of the full moon is certainly different. So, it's funny, the moon has been knocking me out early. Oh, dude, I'll tell you what, I've been so tired. At that time, 8 to 9 o'clock, I'm done, right? I'm ready. I'm falling asleep on the couch. I can't even stay up to read very much. But then the dream state is very active. And then I'm waking up at 3, 4, 5 a.m. and just getting up. So, but yeah, 8 or 9, when it's after it's really risen and kind of hanging there, I'm just it's putting me to sleep. It's almost hypnotizing me. It's really strange. I totally feel that actually. So the 10 of Cups, right? Satiated. All energies are ending and have found their fixed form, right? You see it. It's all coming down to the base. There's a cycle that's complete. It's the 1 and the 0. So it's it's the 1 coming to this infinite, the infinite of the cycle and a very definitive moment. So with this card, we're seeking inner completion, we're seeking fulfillment, and Mars is definitely seeking, right? Because Mars not only rules Aries, which is that first expression of subjective self, the fact that we exist, but it also rules Scorpio, and that is definitely a seeking, a drive, a hunger to merge, right? So we're seeking for something, fulfillment, the end of the cycle and beginning over again. So there's some optimism here. There's love, combining all the elements of our spirit and the body, right? All, again, you're drawing everything down into the material realm. You're drawing spirit down. So kindness, generosity. But I would say a lot of this is the fulfillment and being completely satiated by this Aries full moon, like just being full of being full of all kinds of things. I almost said piss and vinegar, and I'm sure some people really did express that either outwards or had that expressed towards them. And sometimes people mistake people expressing themselves very directly and very with that piss and vinegar, right? The caustic nature in some ways. Sometimes there's something to be said for that. Maybe there's a reason that attitude is presented. And certainly when it works in our favor and we're the ones expressing it, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. But when we're on the other side of it, this is just an aside. When we're on the other side of it and we're receiving that, then all of a sudden it's toxic and we don't like it. So, it's just be willing to start shifting your perspective, or it's going to be shifted for you, or you're just going to ignore all of it, because things are really changing right now. And we do have to take some responsibility for our actions, our behavior, and the energy that we're offering to this whole process. But anyway, so this causal factor has us feeling like pretty full emotionally, and almost to the point where we're so satiated that we're forcing it out in some way. So either in a good way or in a caustic way, a fierce way, maybe a flared temper way, whatever it is, it's because we're full and it needs to be released somewhere, and it's being released pretty forcefully, I would say. And that's certainly where we're coming from, right, with this full moon. So now we have this sense of, yeah, Emily, you got it, right? You got it. Full moon was pleasant. I'm with you on that. Like, but that's because this is my life now. Like, I've known this has been coming for months and months and months. So I was like ready for it. and yeah, anyway, so that's the benefit of using these modalities. It's not so much divination. It's much more just about like, these are the cycles that are, this is the clock ticking. So when things are happening at a certain time, you can prepare just like anything else. So when we move into here, whoops, sorry, there's just so many windows open. So now we move to the current situation, right? The heart of the moment, which is our Four of Wands, or Venus in Aries. So Venus in Aries is hot, man. She is hot, and she wants what she wants, and she draws it to her with her passion and her desire and her potency. But she also will burn that shit right down. The object of her desire, right? She'll just devour it in fire, because it's just hot. It comes in hot and it burns out quickly, right? It's a flash. Just in general, Venus and Aries. Now, the Four of Wands. This is called completion, right? You can see that it's a cycle that is complete. There is all of the wands coming together. There's 8 of them, actually. So they all come together into the middle, right? This is the hub of the wheel. We've talked about this many times because we're still in this lunar cycle that has had us developing and growing within this particular framework of where do we find our center? How do we find our stillness, right? So here's this completion from a spiritual fire type of perspective or energy, right? The fire of Aries, the spark, right? And there's a lot of Aries right now. We got Mars coming in here, and now we have Venus in Aries, and Mars and Venus coming together actually is a very creative process, potentially, right? These two aspects, right? The lovers, we just had this yesterday, Venus and Mars coming together, the lovers. So there's this completion that we're experiencing. But remember, this is the 4. It's a momentary experience of security. It's momentary, right? What's the next step? The next step is the 5 of Wands, which is the strife, right? But in this moment, there's a sense that something has completed. Now, oftentimes, what you find with this card in personal readings or when you're reading for something very specific, you find that the work is done and the plan was quote unquote successful, but it's usually the work is done in a failure type of way on the outside, right? Something has completed, but it's usually not something that we would identify as like, oh, that's a happy thing. It's a failure in the world, out there in the material world or in our lives that is exactly what we needed, though. It's exactly what we need for spiritual growth. So something has come to a completion, some sort of transformative, spiritual, creative experience that has come full circle for this moment because of Venus, right? Venus in Aries. She pulls it towards her. She wants it. And she wants it, and all of her potency and desire pulls it towards her. It's almost like it pulls it all around and completes the circle. And there's a moment of rest, right? There's a moment of completion after all of this activity. But it's not always like in a, oh, that's great. It's usually just like, oh, well, that's finished. And then you come right into the 5 where it's all crumbled away. So again, at the heart here, we're kind of in this moment of like, the rest after the labor, or a completion after some sort of effort, a momentary completion, a momentary security in our transformative spiritual nature. And it has a lot to do with Venus wanting to finish a cycle. And Venus does rule Taurus, which is where the moon is now. So you can feel that there is a sense that we really, really wanted something. We're really motivated to bring something to us. And we feel a sense of like almost accomplishment and like, okay, the cycle has completed. So we have a couple of these images now that have to do with like a cycle completing. But here at the heart is much more of an activity, a cycle of activity that is coming to completion, but is not the end of the situation by any means. It's just kind of like, okay, I can acknowledge the end of this cycle. Something has happened, something that has come to completion. So what we do see here, now we are at our vertical axis of power, where we're drawing our personal power from, where we are rooted, what may be going on in the subconscious, right? Where we are drawing from the core of who we are, right? The 8 of forces, the lightning bolt. It's a pretty standard image here of the lightning bolt splitting the tree, right? It's like this, and this is a very Uranus thing, right? Uranus is like that lightning bolt of awakening that, might split us in two, but then we wake up to a much more spiritual awareness of who we are as a result of whatever this splitting apart, or Uranus being literally turned on its side so that it rotates on its axis like this, right? So that's the same. If you think about it that way, this is how we open that stargate or that wormhole of our own awareness into something way more than ourselves. But it usually takes some sort of radical reorientation, some sort of revolutionary movement, some sort of crisis psychologically. That's a big part of Uranus. So when it's reversed, this card in particular, when it's in its reversal, it's showing that it's already happened. So on some level, again, there's this completion of a very specific type of activity or transformative spiritual activity that we've really wanted and brought to us. And now it's kind of reached some stage of momentary rest and completion. And where we're really drawing our power from and really connecting to the core of who we are is the fact that the storm is already passed. Like, the problem is already, the lightning is already struck, the damage has already been done. And of course you have that satiation from the 10 of Cups. So this emotional, very strong emotional fulfillment, something coming really full circle, very forceful in some ways. And of course, Mars being very forceful, Aries is the spark, the electrical current in terms of fire, cardinal fire. I mean, lightning is nothing more than just natural electricity. So it's already happened. Something that we're experiencing maybe hasn't come to our full awareness yet, but is very much where we are rooted right now, is that the storm is already dispersed, and now it's time to set down new roots. It's time to clear away the debris, time to start new growth, right? And seek new ground. And even though we've suffered a loss, the storm is already dispersing. So there again is our 10 of Cups coming to this moment of transformative completion, a momentary completion of some process that's transformative and creative. And at the root here is the much bigger force that has come in and just destroyed things. So however you see it in terms of your life, the larger context, we see that we've hit this kind of peak moment, and now it's time to move on from there. Where we can really release this energy, where our attention can be, our conscious awareness, what is at the top of our awareness, right? The Queen of Scrolls. This is a woman who is here. She's holding these Akashic scrolls. You know, there's a very thin veil in front of it. And she's got her third eye. It's like a glowing bindi, right? And she's here offering us entryway into this place of much deeper understanding about ourselves and inspiration, right? It's helping us move through the entryway, so to a new level of wisdom and understanding. So where we can really focus our attention, where we can release our power out there to contribute, is really allowing ourselves to embody this identity, to find, to be open to this person that's coming in this role to give us information, inspiration, to help to move through the entryway into a new level of wisdom, and it deepens our understanding and specifically our readiness to learn. That's really, really important. We have to be open to a new wealth of information, a whole new level of wisdom. And this is giving us, an indication that it'll come through an actual person or through some sort of very specific imagery that has to do with a person that's providing something that pulls us to her, right? Which is, again, very much about the feminine pole, or the feminine side of the spectrum, which is receptive, magnetic, receiving, passive. It's not as active. And so, and with the moon in Taurus now, right? The moon embedding into the soil, into the medium of growth, we are almost like insulated when the seed goes into the soil. So we don't have anywhere to really go right now, and just to kind of take it easy, but also to realize that we can put our attention into somebody that fits this bill in some way, or even we become this person in some ways, right? Whatever this is, this represents somebody that's going to offer a new level of wisdom and help us move through the entryway to a much deeper understanding about where we're going. So, because, the Hermit reversed is not an easy card. The Hermit in general is a very powerful card. It's number 9. We've gone over this many times. This is the Virgo the Virgo and 6th house area. There's the cosmic egg again, right here. You have the 3-headed dog of Cerberus. You have the Hermit that is turned away, but is holding the light that, from within, the inner light, the inner wisdom. And this comes from an actual journey into the underworld of ourselves, right? That 6th house is where we surrender to ourselves. So the Hermit is the action of introversion and push and turning away, right? You see that he's turning away and turning towards the cosmic egg, but in the process of turning away, he's still holding the light in the foreground, right? And it's shining on, this germ of a new life. It's shining on the three-headed dog of Cerberus that is guarding the underworld. There's all of this imagery here, but what's really striking to me is the turning away, and also at the same time, the holding of the light in the foreground. You can't really come to bring that light out into the social order until you go into yourself and you do the work in yourself to draw the light out from within yourself. You're not going to find it out there. You have to bring it out of yourself and then offer it. Offer it to the social order, offer it to your relationship, whatever it is. So when it's reversed, a lot of times this is like the bypassing, right? It's retreating that is really running away, right? I don't want to see it. I don't want to interact with what's out there. I'm just going to go into my little hermit hole and never have to deal with anybody. So there's a lot of loneliness that comes into play with this. There's bitterness, right? You're bitter because you are turning away from society, you're turning away from relationship, and it's an important step, but you never actually come back out. That I feel like is part of it. The other side of this as an inverted energy is that you never go in to begin with, because you erroneously believe, and I'm not saying you as anybody in particular, we at any point might erroneously believe that the situation is case closed, right? We come to this level of completion, and it's time to move on, and everything is great. But what it leads to is this not really being open to what to any more investigation, to any more introspection at all. And because the moon is going to be in a square to Saturn in Aquarius, which is often referencing this card, Saturn in Aquarius, the keeper of the wisdom, the gates, keeper of the gates of wisdom in some ways, with the moon in Taurus in a square to Saturn in Aquarius. We'll get into that. This is keeping us from, we feel like we've reached a point of completion, and then we do see, that it's time to step into another phase of deepening awareness. And perhaps this will be something that we will resist. Let's put it that way. Something that we may resist, right? Because what's coming out of the cosmic egg is really very formalized. It's very structured. It's very timely. What's coming out of that cosmic egg, which is part of this card, right? He's turned towards the cosmic egg, and I just feel like with this reversal, it's hard to say it, but it does feel like that there is some resistance to going back into this place. It may require a lot more courage than we're prepared to give ourselves, or that we have. It could be a very, very deep, much deeper introspection than that we have previously embarked upon. There's something very resistant to what this represents. And I do believe that the moon's squaring Saturn today. And also, too, that Mars is going to square Pluto, by the end of today into tomorrow. So we'll talk about that. And I feel like that is also part of this bitterness and the retreat in some ways that this will represent, because a Mars square Pluto is pretty, you got the warrior going up against the very nature of life and death. And so, especially the warrior in its most weakest state, which is in Libra. So that, I think it's just going to provide a lot of challenge. And we're coming at it from a place of like, oh yeah, we've come to an awareness and an understanding, and the cycle is flipping over, and we've reached a point of completion. But it's just a moment. It's just a moment. We have more work to do, so much more work to do. And I do feel like that it's going to be a struggle to take ourselves back down into the rabbit hole. And with where Mercury is today, this will make sense. Now, here's the thing. And as we look at our guidance for today, number 1, the 6 of scrolls. Speaking of scrolls, the sands of time. You see that the hourglass is emptying out. You can see this individual is rolling up the sleeves. You can see that the sun is setting in the background. You can see that there are 3 candles lit already, right? So there is some measure of lighting the way, right? Just like the light that the hermit is able to bring forward and shine. But the sun is setting and there are plans, right? It's got the book or the journal open. It's got one he's got one document or scroll in his hand, and he's got a bunch of others. It's time to get to work, right? And so this particular card really speaks to that the idea that time is of the essence and something very important. And it requires our action or even completion, right? And so there's that concept again. We need to keep focusing. There it is. Focus is still required to get to the end. So I get the sense here that there's a sense of like, oh, we won, or a sense of like something really amazing happened. And I'm not saying that it hasn't happened and that we shouldn't take that as some measure of success. But what this is saying is that it's, because the storm is dispersing, there's a real potential here that we may not actually take the initiative to plant the new seeds, to clear away the debris, to set down new roots, the things that are required after something like the storm passes. And it's important that we don't allow worry or distraction to steer us away. And so this is really bringing our awareness back to this. We have to stay focused, eyes on the prize, right? And then the camel is really just here to show us that we have all of the resources that we need embedded within us, right? That's pretty standard, and this has come up quite a bit. So this concept of the camel, of holding all of the energetic and emotional resources that we need for a journey, for a long and arduous journey, is within us, and we're actually perfectly capable and designed to do so. That's something that's really important too, that we're designed biologically, physiologically to hold this very important energy within us and to sustain us as we go along this journey, because time is of the essence, right? We still live in a dimension where time and space are absolutely relevant, and Saturn is the ticking clock, right? There's no getting around that. The sands of time are moving through the hourglass. We have to pay attention to that. So, but we have everything we need. But the journey is going to be long, and we have to actually start taking the journey. And so when it comes to the deepening of awareness, looking towards some representation of someone that's going to guide us through the entryway, to inspire us, the polar bear is really about, of course, stand up for yourself, speak your truth, not even speak your truth, speak truth, respectfully, compassionately, no attachment to outcome. This is really just not getting deterred, not getting distracted, not getting pulled off course, just being present in your heart space, in your attention, and in your deepening understanding and your search for a new level of wisdom, right? It's speak truth, of course, and no attachment to outcome, but don't get caught, we don't want to get caught up in what other people have to say about it, the general feel about it. There's so many things that will get us pulled off track. We want to be present in our hearts and express from there in our presence. Now, and the Oracle Delphi comes up as well. So you have these two feminine aspects here on top with the Queen of Scrolls and being the guide, and then the Oracle of Delphi literally being the oracle, right? She is receiving the messages. So the idea here is that she's sitting over this fissure. There's likely some sort of mind-altering mineral. If you've ever been into like a sauna with like natural lithium, for instance. So anybody that's familiar with the Pacific Northwest, and knows Brighton-Bush Hot Springs, or has been there, used to work there and live there, and there is a natural sauna. They built a sauna, a steam sauna, over a natural lithium pool. So if you've ever experienced this, and any of the mineral, mineral hot springs are going to have this. The idea is that it changes your consciousness, and then she's able to deepen her intuition. She's able to gather information or images or impressions. But the other side of it is that there's somebody there that's interpreting it, and you can't separate these things from each other. But this seems to be much more about getting into our own intuition, being able to trust what is coming up, and providing these impressions, very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? There's this, it's untampered, right? It's raw. It's original. It's not, it doesn't change until it's been written down and interpreted. There is that interpretation part too. So, but this seems to be like allow in the inspiration, allow in the direct communion with your higher self and with source and nature, however you identify it, allowing it to move through you so that you can deepen your understanding, deepen your wisdom, have a connection to the wisdom. But you have to be present, right? You have to, and this is this is really hard. This is why meditation is important. Yes, it's great for, relieving stress. It's great for a sense of well-being, but it's really about calming all of the cognitive functions just long enough to be able to tap into your gut and to your inner realm in your body and your intuition. I mean, when you can settle all of the chatter of your mind into, to just in pure experience, you get so much more information, but you're not going to do that unless you're present. And you're not going to be able to access this deeper level of information without being present. And sometimes being present is really difficult when you're suffering. If you're in physical pain, if you're in emotional pain, right? If you're really, really anxious or worried about something, and that's where your brain just goes back to those places, or you're hyper focused on what's not working or what hurts in your body or whatever. Again, the meditation is a practice in order to quiet all of that chatter, quiet all of that, to bring your awareness back to just being present. And when you're present, you have access to a whole body of information that you otherwise would not have, as the monkey mind keeps roiling around up there. So that's the reading for today, and let's start looking at our astrology for today so that we can apply this to something, amazing. So let me do this real quick. There we go. So we can get the formatting just right. So this is our chart for today. As you see, the moon is in Taurus. It loves to be in Taurus. I mean, there's certainly a strong urge to be comfortable, right? This is Netflix and chill, right? I want to feel safe. I want to feel comfortable emotionally. I want to bask in this completion, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just going to be way more. It's gonna be really influenced by my moon in Taurus, right? Because we want to feel held and secure in the world around us. Okay. But the moon's you can already see it. The moon's gonna meet Uranus today, so just be prepared for that. And check in the chat real quick. So, sitting over a fissure like an earthquake or a volcano, releasing Earth's ancient knowledge. Correct. Sonia, ding, ding, ding. You win. But I'm not surprised by that anyway, based on all of our conversations all the time. So let's start looking at this, because there's some interesting things. First of all, you're not going to see it on this chart because for whatever reason they won't put Lilith on this particular chart. But Black Moon Lilith and Asteroid Ceres are early this morning, late last night, were in a conjunction with each other. So Ceres, asteroid Ceres, is retrograde. Ceres is the goddess of the grain, the goddess of agriculture. She is the mother of Persephone, who was, there's a lot of different accounts of how it all unfolded, but she ended up in the underworld and essentially was married to Hades or Pluto, right? And her mother, in her grief, had Mercury, was like, Zeus, do something about this. And no other deity or god was able to go into the underworld. And so they sent Mercury, because Mercury, or Hermes, was the only one that could do so, right? So it goes down there and brokers this deal. And basically, because you're not allowed to leave. Nobody's allowed to leave the underworld once they're down there. That's the whole point, right? You cross the river Styx and that's it. And so Mercury or Hermes often would be considered a shepherd of souls, right? For people who got lost or whatever, taking them to where they need to go in the underworld. So he goes down there and brokers this deal. And basically what the compromise they came to is that for half of the year, Persephone stays in the underworld as the queen of the underworld with Hades, and for the other half of the year, she is allowed back on the surface or whatever with her mother. So that time of year when she's in the underworld is the time of year where seasonally the earth is barren, right? This is the winter, which is what we're coming into, right? We're coming into the sun in Scorpio. So in the northern hemisphere, which is where a lot of these myths really got their traction, in the northern hemisphere. We're about to go into Scorpio season, so everything's contracting. And so in her grief, Ceres was like, I'm not going to give you anything. I'm going to contract completely. I'm going to make the world barren. I'm going to go dead. And that's like her protest every year, and as a result of her grief. So that's the story. That's the myth. But Ceres does represent, the function of agriculture that is, what sustains us, and what sustains all life. Any animal life that is going to be utilizing plants as sustenance, for instance, is impacted by this on Ceres and her oscillation and her contraction and release, right? Going growth and outward yang period, and then the inner contraction period. So she is retrograde. So there is this contraction element that's the asteroid Ceres is representing right now, and then meeting Black Moon Lilith, which is the dark feminine, the self-preservation for survival, the demand to be seen and acknowledged, that is also very connected to the planet. There is some interesting connections here. Anyway, they came together late last night, early this morning in Gemini. And so this is really strengthening a very strong virtuosity for each of us to really master our own unique skill set, whatever it is, to the point where it has less to do with us as individuals and much more to do with something so much deeper than just us. And that's something to hold on to as we go through the rest of this, because again, our conscious and deep participation in the entire process is really what the sun is representing right now over here in late Libra. And there's something very deep. There's something very, ancient. There's something that is at the root of us that we don't even realize, something that connects us to all life in general, and the process of nature and life in general, that is really almost inspiring us, but certainly in influencing our process of being the best version of ourselves that we can be, right? For the sake of participating in the whole, right? It's in Gemini. This is where we practice our skill set. This is where we learn a technique or, learn some sort of skill and practice it, get better at it. It's because it's rote repetition, right? You're working with knowledge. And so you're accumulating knowledge, you're processing knowledge. You are practicing a skill in the third house in Gemini. And so these two coming together is really deep. It's impacting us on a level that is way deeper than just our ego consciousness, okay, when they came together. So that's happened first. Now, when we move past that, the first thing that you can see it's already happened is the moon. I'm going to go back a couple hours here. The moon was in a square to Saturn in Aquarius, as you can see here. So this square is actually a Draco activation right here where the moon is. 6 to 7 degrees of Taurus is a Draco activation. Why? Because it's in a trine to Alpha Draconis. So this particular degree represents from the Sabian symbol the woman at the well, the Sumerian woman at the well. And if you know the story, it's from the New Testament, right? And the Sumerians hated the Hebrews and the Hebrews hated the Sumerians, even though they came from the same basic background. They split at one point, and then they were taught to essentially, hate each other. Sound familiar? So even though they're exactly the same, they had the same ancestral root, but they, for whatever reason, politically started to hate each other. So Jesus shows up with the disciples at the well because it was, the well is, it's one of his direct descendants, the land of of Jesus' direct descendants. And I can't exactly remember anymore. So maybe somebody has way more knowledge about biblical history could fill in this gap, but it doesn't really matter right now. The point is that he gets to the well and he's going to go get water for everybody. And this woman shows up who is part of the Sumerian community, and he asks her for water, and she's just so taken aback that he would even talk to her because she's an outcast in her own community because she, she's been married several times and she's just just an outcast, right? She goes against the grain of the society and, can't really get it together, according to them. So the fact that he's even addressing her as a human being is enough for her to be like, whoa, what's going on here? So beyond that, then she offers him the water and then he calls her out and, because it's Jesus, right? So he's got the goods, right? And so he calls her out and is just like, I know that you've been married several times and blah, blah, blah. And she's just like, who are you? And he actually reveals himself as God in the flesh directly to her. He's done that with no one else, not even his own disciples. It's all parable. It's all, it's all parable and story and symbolism. He tells her directly who he is, and reveals himself as God to her. And it's because she had the ability to, because she was an outcast in her own community, right? That she had the capacity to see him for who he was at the same time that he saw her for who she was at the same time. So there is this acceptance of a new quality of being. It's like leaving behind the old traditional images. Oh, that's an interesting, right? Where Chiron is, leaving behind the old tradition and being able to make space for what is coming, right? Because you're not attached to what was. And just like the woman was not attached to where she came from, and that came because she was consistently outcasted, which allowed her to have the space within her to hold the future, right? To see the future, to hold, which was the Messiah, right? The whole idea of Jesus being the Messiah, being God incarnate. So this square I know it's a long story, but still, the square to Saturn, right? Saturn in Aquarius is like, this is a very distinct moment in time that you can't do anything about. There is a new emerging global human that's coming forward. There is a completely new mutation of humanity that is being born, that is devoid of the karma that had come before it, the ancestral karma. It's some completely new, but it's very much in the institutions, right? It's in the actual fabric of time and space itself. Like there's no getting around it with the cosmic egg cracking open and what's coming out, right? It's the square to the moon that is in relation to Draco, which allows for, even though it's in a square, right? It allows for us to lean into the friction of that moment that is kind of like the Oracle of Delphi in some ways, where you are able to hold, because you're not attached to what has been, right? You are able to have the space to see and to hold what is to come. And that is part of the ability of the serpent medicine and the serpent ability, and what that really provides for, right? Because as the Kundalini rises and it opens the third eye, for instance, and you see things in a whole, in awakened state, that's also something that you can allow for in that situation. So we each are in this moment here where we have the opportunity to commune with what is to come within ourselves, despite, like, outside of time and space, right? Despite a very distinct, like, this is happening. This is definitely happening. There's no getting around what's happening, right? The cosmic egg is cracking open, and a new version of humanity is coming out, and it's right on time. And the sands of time, this comes back around. In fact, the Six of Scrolls is the sands of time. Look, 6 and 6 and 6. Oh my gosh. This is an important moment here where we can't sit back and just accept what is. We can have a moment of stasis, right? We can have a moment of like, okay, I see the whole picture now. I see how it's come full circle, but there's so much more that's coming. And we have to be able to lean into that and not lose ourselves in the face of, the Saturnian thing, which is, no matter how you look at it, it's nothing can stop what is coming, basically. So we can either align with it by letting go of what's been, or we'll be in resistance, right? We'll be in resistance to all aspects of it. So that's the beginning of that, Moon square Saturn. Then the moon comes into a sextile with Pallas Athena, right? The traveling the narrow path, the eye of the needle. And this sextile is showing that we can reconcile this by cultivating our own ego consciousness. And we just talked about this earlier, right? You water the garden, you tend to the garden, you get to enjoy the benefits of what comes out of that, but it doesn't belong to you, right? You're just part of the process unfolding naturally, and you are a steward to it. You don't own it. You are part of life just like everything else. We all are. And so but traveling through the eye of the needle, right? It would be, what is the phrase? What is the parable or whatever? It would be easier for, it's more difficult for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than it would be for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Oh, there's the camel again. Oh, that's interesting. So we are employing this strategy within us to narrow our focus, narrow, because we want to be able to get through that narrow pathway, that narrow opening. We don't have the means. We can't take all of it with us, right? And the sextile with this is really letting us know that we can really harmonize with everything that we're seeing. We're not going to take it all with us, but we can, at the very least, we can participate in cultivating the natural process. We can water the garden. We can take care of the land. We can take care of the soil. We can be part of, growing the garden of our own ego consciousness in order to just be part of it and to be stewards of it. But we're not going to take it with us. Just so you know, we're not taking it with us. We are just part of stewarding the natural process. So this allows us to reconcile that in a way that's not going to weigh us down with all of the baggage of being in worshiping materialism, essentially. Because when you don't move past the Taurus, right, this is where you get into the false idols of the golden calf and stuff. Taurus is the ox. And when you worship the material realm, you don't get past this. And so this is how we can, rectify this or reconcile being in a very physical material reality, and also acknowledging that we need to find our strategy for getting through the eye of the needle, to walking the very narrow path. The moon is going to be in a quincunx to Mercury right after that, actually. And Mercury is now moving. It's moving direct, like it's starting to gain momentum now. And in 11 to 12 degrees Libra, this is, surfacing from the coal mine, right? It's important that people are going down and extracting this knowledge for the sake of the social order, but you can't stay down there forever. But the quincunx, you can actually see here that we're looking at a yod from Venus, and we'll get to Venus in a second. We're looking at a yod, a finger of God, to this, not only to the moon, but also to Uranus as well. And that finger of God is showing you the focus, right? Even though these two things, it's this alchemical focus towards this one point that comes from a reconciliation from these two sides, which would be Mercury and Venus, for instance, in this case. Again, we can't separate ourselves from just being in the physical world while we're in the physical world. Here we are. And the moon is exalted in Taurus, right? Our subconscious, our feelings, we want to, and we enjoy, we feel safe as we are surrounded by the objective reality, the materialism that makes up the world around us, right? This is, how we survive in a lot of ways. We can start to become aware. We start to become aware of what's possible, and we start to become aware of what we could have, right? From an emotional place, from in our subconscious, right? We start to really touch on like, oh, look at all the things I could have. Look at what I could gather for myself. This is what it means to be in material form. Oh, this is very interesting. And then the quincunx, right? How do we adjust ourselves to our minds that are like going into the darkness and then coming back out? How is that going to fit? They don't fit together, right? Because what's over here has a lot to do primarily with the social order and relationship, whereas Taurus is just about our experience being in the physical world and what that entails. So we're going to have to find a way to adjust this process, and this finger of God, or this yod, I think, is a real big part of it. Because with Venus over here coming into the second half of Sagittarius now, it's very tempting. And it's very much more comfortable, Venus, to take the path of least resistance, right? When you're in a social paradigm, a collective value system of beliefs and the law, and what this whole group has come together and really wrapped itself around in terms of a belief system or values, it's way easier to just take what's handed out to you rather than act. And we just talked about this, right? That rather than going and getting it for yourself with what has been provided to you naturally. Your natural ability to go and get your own sustenance is not as preferable as getting the handout from the culture, basically. And with Venus here, it's going to come, again, it's going to come through our relationships, come through our value systems, our traditions, our, projects, things that have actual physical value and monetary value, social value, all of the things. Venus is about what's valuable. And so the thing is when there'll be a direct sextile to, between these two eventually. But in the meantime, it's still pretty wide, but it is showing that there's also a need to adjust ourselves in terms of the very distinct experience of being in the physical world and the material world. and experiencing it directly, right? There's something to be said for that. And we can adjust ourselves along both of these lines towards this point of material reality by investing these two energies into each other, right? Where, there is a lot of value placed on the culture and our collective belief systems and our broad horizons. And we can apply and invest that into a mental state that is really taking us down into the depths and back up, down into the depths and back up. We don't want to stay in one place or the other for too long. We need to be moving, just like the scales. The scales are always in a dynamic balance with each other. Our minds are also in that state right now and going down, extracting, and then taking a break. Going down and extracting and taking a break. Where we can invest into the value of the culture is it gives us something to come back. We bring it back up and add it to the overall belief system. And it does make it easier to extract. It doesn't make it easier to interact with the value system or the abstractions of a culture when our mental capacity is supported by going down and coming back up, right? And then we can easily take from that process, right? What's comfortable to us. We can take from that process because our minds very much want to go down into that space, but come back out as well. We can't the risk of being spiritually asphyxiated if we stay down there is very, very strong. But so when we invest these actions into each other, I feel like that allows us to adjust ourselves on both ends when it comes to the very real, palpable, visceral experience of being in the material world and what that provides for us, right? We're trying to figure things out. We're trying to piece it together. We're trying, and we also want to take what is easily accessible and the path of least resistance from the culture, right? Because that's what feels good and that is what's valuable to us. But we also need to actually live in the material world of our senses and our gut and our intuition, because that's what, especially the moon in Taurus. I mean, that's definitely very much about the intuition. So there's a lot on our plate today that's really we can't necessarily sit back on our laurels as much as we want to. We have to actually find the still point in the storm because it's still moving around and there's not a lot of time left necessarily to just sit back and be like, oh, they got it figured out. It's okay. Or I know what's up. Because what happens is number one, the moon's going to cross Uranus today. By this evening, late afternoon, early evening. And then that's going to be quite the jolt to our emotional security and our intuition and our subconscious, right? To meet Uranus like that. That's going to be our emotions being totally, that's emotional crisis in a lot of ways, but also very awakening in terms of our emotions and our intuition at that moment as well. I mean, it'll awaken to the point where we will be like, oh, yeah, this is how I actually revitalize and charge myself again, is going back to nature. You can keep going into the culture and into the society and down the rabbit hole all you want. But at the end of the day here, what it's saying, we need to get back to our roots, our actual physical material roots of our DNA and our bodies and our energy and how that all plays together. And this is going to be brought right to our at least subconscious awareness and our feeling today when the moon crosses Uranus. And then after that, the moon crosses Uranus and then it moves into an exact quincunx with Venus. And this is where we find that the inadequacy of past knowledge is really obvious, right? What we've already learned from in traditional knowledge, right? An old teacher fails to interest his pupils. This is a Sabian symbol of 16 degrees Taurus. An old teacher fails to interest the pupils in traditional knowledge. So you can see here this quincunx, right? Again, another adjustment period exact in that we realize once we cross Uranus, we're like, oh, what I thought I knew or what I've been told is not actually holding up anymore, right? It's not working. And so when Venus is like, I'm really more comfortable just, taking the easy path of least resistance and just taking what the culture feeds me or provides me in order to sustain myself, which is Venus is just like, I'm going to pull towards me all of the aspects of the culture that allow me to feel comfortable and to belong to it. It's not going to work, right? This is going to be a pretty distinct, and this is late tonight, maybe even into very early in the morning, depending on where you are. So this is going to be pretty significant by the end of the day. It's just going to be like, how do I adjust myself in this moment? Because what I thought I knew and what I've been told is not actually working in terms of fulfilling me at this level anymore. And, but in my senses and in my relationships and in the world around me, like, I want to gather the value from that situation, from the culture. And there's gonna be some real struggle with that, I think. Again, this is where going into the hermit mode there's gonna be a lot of like resistance and discomfort to that. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and this is the capstone for the day, is that Jupiter will be in a sextile to Juno, right? Jupiter and Juno, or Zeus and Hera, or Zeus and Juno, or Zeus and Hera, right? The husband and wife team that is always at odds with each other, because Jupiter is always expanding out into experience, right? Big picture. Juno is always working to keep those scales of their contract balanced, even if it means that she has to act out in a vengeful manner to balance things out when he betrays their contract. But they're meeting in a sextile today at the end of the day, right? So Jupiter meeting Juno in this, they get to reconcile. They get to reconcile their opposition with each other. And in the process of doing that, through Juno, right, who's got the scales, and she represents the balancing of the contract in their, relationship or their marriage, accepting the new territory we're coming into. When she does that, then Jupiter is able to provide the resources for us to really handle the full amount of energy of the collective coming together, right? But there has to be an acceptance or a willingness to accept the framework of the new territory we're heading into, right? When that happens, and then when Jupiter or Zeus expanding and advocating for us in the harnessing of the natural energy of Aquarius, right? Which is the entire, the awakened state of humanity. When those two come together, they are able to reconcile, but it will require on some level an acceptance of the new traditions and the new requirements of coming into a completely new state, right? And so they can reconcile in that moment. And so there's a lot of focus here in the fact that we're going to come into this whole new level of awareness, but it's going to come out of a cycle clearing up and finishing, but it's a very momentary completion. And we're going to have to go into another cycle of very uncomfortable immersion and depth that I think a lot of people are not going to, it's getting, we're going on almost 2 years now of what's been happening. And so people are burnt out, they're exhausted. They aren't aware that there's like a whole next level of deception and control, and that we're going into new territory in general. So wow, I didn't expect any of that, to be perfectly honest, coming out. Yeah, I prepare for these readings and I do them, but most of what comes through is actually the transmission is happening in real time once I provide myself all of the framework for it. It's right. And I've been thinking about this a lot too. And I know I'm having conversations with other people about just like this completely new framework of how to understand our lives and the reality that we're interacting with, and not, it's not going to be easy. And it's not like there aren't successes or wins. There very much is a cycle completing and some level of like, oh, I did this. But what it's doing is opening a whole new level now that we have to explore. And I think that that's just, it's going to be a lot, because again, the comfort level is to just take what the culture is giving us. And believe me, they're giving us a lot. And a lot of it is stuff that people don't realize that is also curated for them. And I think that's really difficult to wrap your head around, to be perfectly honest. So if you're already doing that, then you are ahead of the game. And if not, then it's going to be an interesting Scorpio season, because that's on its way. So tomorrow, Mars is going to be right tomorrow morning, first thing as the changeover into the 22nd. Mars is in conjunction with Arcturus, is going to square Pluto. So again, this time, because these two both rule Scorpio, they're going to really, there's for them to be in a square with each other, it's going to be bitter. It's going to be bitter and very powerful, and going for it big time. So I'm curious to see how this unfolds as well. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll talk about all the astrology for the week coming up sometime tomorrow. Actually, at the usual time tomorrow, anytime between 10 and 10:30. So I'm going to leave it there, my friends. Thank you so much for being here. I truly, truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. I'm going to extend the sale for the How Does It End reading. It's a 90-minute reading. Takes you through all the way up to 2021 with your personal astrology. So you can book that through catalystenergies.net, or you can just email me and put in the subject line, how does it end? Or I want to know how it ends, or whatever. And we can get that going for you. And let me know how you're doing. I appreciate all your comments. I'm going to check out the chat real quick. Mary Magdalene was identified as the woman at the well. She was most likely an oracle as well. Where is that information from? Because I'd like to explore that well, because I could see how that would be covered up. Why I can see why that would be covered, that it was her at the well and not some other woman. So I'm just curious where that information comes from, because I'd like to be able to dive into that more. And she was most likely an oracle as well. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Again, because like the people who are kind of pushed to the outside of their communities, just like the shaman, because they can't really interface with the normal communal life very well, those are the ones that tend to have access to different realms of knowing and wisdom. And we got that Queen of Scrolls again, right? So I like this train of thought here, where this is going, and the idea that it is in our own intuition, that it is in our own subconscious, in the darkness within ourselves, that we're really going to get these answers. So I like that concept. So guys, I hope you're doing well, taking really good care of yourself. Don't be afraid to consider alternative realities that you may not have even considered before. And that's really scary. I tend to run the simulation for everything that frightens me, just to like play it out and see how it feels. So I always suggest people do the same. That way you're not, caught up in somebody else's rendition of reality. If it in fact isn't, if it's curated and artificial, it's important to consider. And with Venus and Sagittarius, I mean, Sagittarius is great. And Venus is great. All of these things are great, but there is a desire to be comfortable with Venus, and a desire to attract to her the cultural paradigm in order to feel comfortable. And there's too much in this astrology and too much in the intuitive reading today that's pointing us in a direction that's like eventually going to have to move past that and move past our comfort, be willing to be uncomfortable as we address old images that have new meaning now, just like where Chiron is. So guys, that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow for the astrology. Have a great day. I love you. Reach out if you need support. Reach out on social media if you want to stay connected. And we will connect tomorrow for astrology. Take care of yourself. God bless. Bye.